You are now listening to the Big Data Beard. Hi, everybody. This is Corey Minton with another edition of the Big Data Beard podcast. And today we are in beautiful Denver, Colorado at the headquarters of Arrow. Gentleman from Arrow, Devitt Potter, Global Security Practice Lead. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
And Frank Lyles, Splunk Sales Engineer for Arrow. How are you doing this morning?
Doing fine, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I've got my buddy Brett Roberts with me today. We are trying to fight through some of the wind, and there's a pretty serious storm coming through, which is pretty common here in the Rockies.
Yep.
And it's going to alter our schedule just a little bit. Oh, that's okay. We'll be fine. The video, yeah, actually, what you could do is unplug that, and just go. Well, it's fine. Unplug it and then replug it and re-add that video source. It'll be fine. No worries. Sometimes these things happen. We have technical difficulties.
Yep. So I actually host the Arrow Bandwidth podcast, so well familiar with. You get a good 3 minutes in, and people are like, I didn't catch any of that. You're like, awesome. Yeah. I guess we'll just start all over.
It's incredible.
Like it was brand new. So.
Well, that's the beauty. So live streaming, total set of challenges that we're noobs, totally new at. Podcasting is pretty predictable, right?
Yeah.
As long as you get a good recording. I say
sound,
predictable.
yeah.
We've had issues with those
now
too.
You jinxed it, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
You
That's
had
true.
to say something.
I forgot to press record on one of a really important podcasts one time, and we got done with it, and we were like, oh, well, I guess that's just not going to happen because I can't ask the guy to do it again. So anyways. Well,
oh, no.
So that's the fun of podcasting, and that's the fun of weather in the Rockies. There's just a lot of unpredictable things you can't deal with.
Yeah. And, good or bad, it's usually when I'm around that the bomb cyclones come through.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you with us.
Both times I was here last year, the bomb cyclones came through. The first one was for the serious one. The second one was like
a bomb cyclone. So I thought you were like referring to like a trouble cyclone, like you were the bomb cyclone, but you're technically referring to something else.
Event. No, they have a different phrase for me.
What is a bomb cyclone?
So they just have one in New England too. It's like when the barometric pressure drops so dramatically that basically the weather like almost like a vacuum to it, and just the temperature drops dramatically. The precipitation comes in a big way.
Oh.
When it was here, the first one last year, we ended up with like 18 inches of snow in 24 hours.
Wow.
As a skier, it was fantastic. Yeah.
I was skiing for that. It was
I was
awesome.
at Copper the next day. It was phenomenal.
So we were actually trying to drive from Denver out to Breckenridge.
Okay, yep.
The day after the avalanche covered I-70.
Yeah,
so we get
Frisco.
right to, I guess, the last exit before the tunnel, and they're turning everyone around. So we went back here. We had a nice little brunch, got some delicious donuts, and then tried again. And we actually had to go all the way around the back end to get into Breckenridge. But the next day, they were actually shoveling snow from the lift. And, I mean, you actually had to, like, lift up everything so high or else you were going to fall.
Yeah.
It was 18
it was crazy.
inches of snow overnight.
That's
amazing.
awesome. Well, I do love the Rockies. We've got an incredible view here. Your offices, I heard these are some new offices.
Yep, this one's been here about 4 years now. We remodeled it, and then we actually built the one across the street about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. So we clearly know who Arrow is a little bit, and we heard on the Breakfast with the Beards this morning a little bit about who Arrow is. But for our listeners of the podcast, tell us a little bit about what Arrow's mission is and what you guys do in the tech industry.
Sure. So from a corporate standpoint, you'll hear us internally call it Mother Arrow, but Arrow Electronics is the parent corporation.
Okay.
And primarily it is an electronics manufacturer. Right? I think chipsets, boards, silicon design, things like that. One of the cool things we get to say internally at Arrow is that you probably touch 5 Arrow products before breakfast. I didn't think about it.
That's very
cool. It's actually like the boards in your coffee makers. You get a laptop there that we may have actually designed some of the boards for, like the FPGAs and some of the ASICs for. And then we also have different pieces, right? So we call that, Arrow Electronics or Global Components. Then we have our Arrow Global Services, which is kind of probably what it sounds like. We do some of the integration pieces. We might actually build some of the appliances. We might work with different manufacturers to put those pieces together and send them out to market. And then we have where Frank and I live is our ECS division, or Enterprise Computing Solutions.
Okay.
The other thing is we love our acronyms here at Arrow. So if I say one, don't hesitate to ask me to elucidate.
We'll totally ask you. And candidly, I want to tell you you're special, but everybody's bad at it. All of us love acronyms.
Yeah. It's a thing, right?
Yeah, even the military. Brett spouts off these things all the time about.
Yeah, and they look at me like I have something on my forehead. Yeah.
Well, so what we should do is have you talk to our public sector group, because then y'all could have that conversation, and we'd all just sit over here and say, yeah,
whatever. I heard one from Brett the other day. It wasn't an acronym, but it was an Army phrase that I want to share because I felt not very smart knowing what it was. Have you ever heard the term lickies and chewies?
I have, and I cannot remember what it is. My father was in the Army, so I
So I got to give a quick shout out because I know he does listen to the podcast. Glenn McCowan, he was my boss. He was a major in the Army when I was a captain, and he would say that all the time. That's where I learned it. But it's snacks. It's small like chewable snacks, chips, candy, stuff like that. Yeah.
See, that feels very like you made it longer because you could just say snacks, but lickies and chews. And it's actually one of the ones I learned from our Aussie friends. The sprinkles you put on ice cream.
Yeah.
They call that hundreds and thousands. It's like you could just call it sprinkles. It'd be so much shorter.
Yeah, but see, that's not how the military works.
Yeah.
If there's
the
an
Army's not
easy
about
name
being
for it, you
efficient,
gotta
let's just
have
be
it.
honest.
Exactly.
gotta
But
make it
what's interesting,
complicated.
it's probably one of the only terms that's not like that we don't have to censor. you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Most military acronyms, if they're colloquial, have to be censored, right?
Yeah.
If there's an F in an acronym in the military, you can pretty much assume what that means.
That's right.
So-
Absolutely.
But
So-
but at ECS, so we're the distribution arm, right?
Okay.
So our customers are going to be our resellers. Some of the big ones that we all know and love, our reseller community. So then from our aspect, we do a lot of the pre-sales engineering, design on those pieces, consultative approach. It's where Frank and I live. That's what a lot of my job here at Arrow was the last 8 years, until the global practice lead. So then I kind of look at our entire portfolio.
Okay. So the ECS team, do you focus in on any specific areas of kind of digital transformation and digital disruption? Are there specific strong suits for Arrow ECS?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll let Frank get into this as well. So we've really pivoted, I would say, in the last probably 6-7 years from really on more of a product set, like we're a data center company, or we're a security company, or we do route switch, into more people saying, I need to know how to do all these things because my customers are asking for that. So we're definitely looking at more of the business outcomes of, hey, I'm a retail organization. I want my folks to carry on an iPad and not have to come back and forth all the time. How do I do that? Right? Or, we've always done X, Y, and Z with paper tills and all that, or, carried around things like that. How do we do things like that? Or, we've got an old AS400. How do we get on to what's this cloud thing y'all are talking about? And then, then of course my boss saw this Splunk thing, and what the hell's a Splunk, and how do I work with that? And so Frank does a lot of those pieces as well.
Yeah. So can you give us some examples of just how you are doing that in some of the customer use cases that you're helping solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that we've been involved with, especially in we see a big emerges in the IoT market, which is interesting because everybody thinks of IoT as the sensors, right? And that's a big piece of it, and that's a big part of the components piece. But realistically, a sensor is useless unless it does something, right?
Absolutely.
Neat. Temperature and pressure, cool, I can graph it over time. It's, collating that with weather data, things like that, just-in-time inventory, pieces like that. So we actually see a lot of business cases. Well, there's a pretty big brewery around these joints that if you're in the Rocky Mountains, you're probably familiar with. They talk about being cold brewed, and that's kind of their big claim to fame, right? We started out with them doing IoT tagging on kegs. For some reason, I'm sure none of us are guilty of it, kegs seem to go missing around college towns. It's weird.
I don't know why you looked at me when you said that.
Yeah, so I have no idea any about this. Well, they started out with it doing geotagging, right? Where did it go? Well, then they realized, with temperature and pressure on it, if I tear out the way to the keg, then I can extrapolate how heavy is that keg. Then I actually can use the geolocation data to say, okay, where is it as far as on the route goes? And then we saw analytics on it of, hey, during a certain time of year, if the Broncos are losing, which it was maybe this year, because I don't want to talk about that too much, beer consumption goes up in certain verticals or certain areas, right? So then it was a matter of, hey, let's look at staffing on those things. Let's bring in more people to do that. So that has actually driven quite a bit of that. And then where does all that data come from? Providing the customer experience. Well, now we got wireless issues. Well, we got credit card machines. Now we got PCI issues to worry about. All those silly things that it's hard for one person to know. We have actually been able to bring in these disparate pieces of it to, hey, we build the sensors. Hey, we've got the analytics folks. We've got infrastructure folks. And so either we've brought in the right partners that say, okay, you're a Splunk crew, you guys do that. You're a wireless group, y'all will do that. Or we act as more of a consultant fashion and bring those people together and say, hey, brewing company XYZ, here's what we think.
Yeah.
So we've had a really good experience with being the almost pseudo-agnostic consultative approach. And then they say, well, we like these guys and these guys and these guys. And we might say, well, we don't like X because XYZ, we'd rather do this. So we've had some pretty good results that way.
I love that. I love this story, only because we scooted right past said brewery and big fans of the cold blue cans.
Yep.
So one of the things that people may or may not know about Arrow is you guys have crazy number of partnerships.
Correct.
And one, I want to say thank you for partnering with the Big Data Beard for the road trip to Conf. And one of those important partnerships that you guys have is with Splunk.
Correct.
Right? So I'm curious, Frank, maybe from your perspective, what really kind of prompted the partnership and the interest from Arrow with Splunk, and how has that partnership evolved over time?
I guess Splunk got to the point to where they knew that they need to have a focused, organized channel of partners, and came to looked at distribution as a way to grow that part of the market for them. And so I think it was pretty much an obvious choice to have Arrow. And by the way, the relationship we have with Splunk is that we manage commercial business partners, right? Where there's another distribution channel for federal government or public sector type of partners. And I think it made a lot of sense. A lot of these companies, these resellers and these MSPs, these service providers, many of these are already customers of Arrow anyway.
Okay.
So we can work with them on a type of product and technology in the marketplace that's really hot and exciting and growing, and allow these companies to diversify in some cases, in other cases grow not necessarily a new dedicated practice, but incorporate something into a practice, kind of let them take that next step.
So not only helping Splunk customers adopt the technology, but actually helping their partner, their channel community is part of the role for Arrow with Splunk. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's really an approach, going back to what Davitt was talking about, that part of the other approach, kind of a two-pronged methodology, which is to get outside of just dealing with IT and start dealing with line of business. And what I mean by that is really take a look at an organization and say, what are the business objectives, right? And then what are the actual initiatives that they are running? Can I get involved in one of these initiatives? And then what are the challenges, right?
Yep.
And if we can put together a value proposition that says, look, I understand your objectives, I understand how to work with you and improve this initiative, whether it's cutting cost or bringing it in on time, on budget, whatever it might be, and then overcoming and dealing with the challenges, then all of a sudden now we're working with line of business and we're working with IT. We're bringing both together. And, and being able to do that with our partners is all about allowing or helping build that practice,
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's
a whole other type of business.
One thing that you hit on there, which is use case is so incredibly important, and tying a technology initiative to a business outcome and a business use case. And I'll tell you, the folks that we've talked to over the years in this podcast that have been most successful, and if you go back and look at the ones that were really successful in the market versus the ones that have struggled, it's that focus right there. And I actually think that's one of the things that Splunk has done a really good job of, is they took their technology, which was, people many times pigeonholed it, right, as this log indexer and analyzer.
Yep.
But through their acquisition strategy and their focus on use cases has broadened.
Absolutely.
And crazy kind of broadened. So I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you got a security practice lead, you got somebody focused on Splunk. I know you guys we saw some of the IoT cars with the SAM car, right? What are the most popular use cases that you're seeing today, and the outcomes that that organizations are trying to drive by partnering with Splunk and Arrow?
Well, would you mind if I kind of preface that with something?
Please,
before we end?
lay it on me.
So, as we talk to customers from coast to coast, we're seeing more and more organizations embracing, the idea that what we call machine data is a very important critical asset of their business, right? It's just a matter of, now we've got this stuff, what do we do with it? How do we find value in it? And more people they understand that and are doing something with it. So we're starting to see more of an evolution I'll get to this in a minute on the other end of this, but it's just like any other raw material. You start out with data, and then from the data you can get what? Information. And then from information you can grow that to intelligence. And a lot of organizations stop there, right? Which is all well and good, but from my perspective on it is, I expect a business to be intelligent. I expect people working in business to be intelligent. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
I think there's another level, and there's organizations now that are starting to take it to that next level, beyond intelligence, which is a word I'm calling wisdom.
Okay.
Right? So instead of just making intelligent decisions, doing something because it's an intelligent move, making a wise decision, right? Is this a wise financial decision we're making? Is this a wise competitive decision we're making? Puts us in a better competitive position, things like that. So it's kind of that next
so building on that collective intelligence, right? How do you codify that tribal knowledge, those activities? I like that.
So I wanted to preface by saying that, and then the other thing, before we directly answer your question, is that the real value in a product like Splunk, or for that matter, assembling big data type of analytic products and putting them together, the real value is in supporting multiple use cases.
Absolutely.
That's where customers come to the realization that we really see value in this now, right? As a matter of fact, we would have paid a lot more for this, having known up front that what it's worth.
Yeah.
Because what they're saying is that, if I look at this solution just as a point solution against some other point solution, the other point solutions typically might look better, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's what they're built to do. But a platform like Splunk, you really need to, I'm just saying this to the whole community, you really need to kind of embrace the idea that if I can take that same data and apply different use cases to it, so I'm doing things with security, I'm doing things to manage my fraud, things like we talked about to deal with all different lines of business.
Yep.
It's your data.
Yeah.
Go ahead and use it.
Absolutely.
Then you see real value in it.
Absolutely.
So I know we're going to shift and move into other things, but as David pointed out earlier, there's some things that seem to be taking a bigger slice of the pie than our traditional just IT ops things, which is cybersecurity and everything under that whole umbrella. The market of not necessarily just Internet of Things, but the whole asset intelligence are really starting to explode.
Absolutely.
So we're seeing lots of just innovative ideas, and a lot of work going into formulating strategies that are ready to take to market.
Yeah.
So Frank, I like that idea of moving from intelligence to wisdom and that like evolution. There's going to be some challenges that customers face as they make that progression. What are some of those challenges that you're seeing out there, and how has Arrow and really using Splunk helping solve those challenges?
Oh, it's all over the map.
Yeah.
It's because it's not just a point solution where we're dealing with any particular types of things. I think some of the challenges that we're seeing are that as you start talking to businesses about a very specific thing, is something doesn't exist already.
Okay.
Like we don't have an app or an environment built to handle that specific use case. We got to go develop that, right?
Yep.
Now, chances are it may have been developed, but somebody's keeping that real close to the vest, right? That's their IP. So it's they're not just putting it out there public anymore. So I think there's a huge opportunity for our partners and for the collaboration between partners and companies they deal with to go create these solutions. The capability to create these and spin these up quickly and cost effectively is here today. So it's a vague answer to your question, but that's what's really the reality is we need to identify these things and create them. And then once you've created that, chances are that same problem is going to resurface and emerge somewhere else, and you can address that then. So that could be your new IP.
Yeah, no, and that does make sense. Sorry to cut you off.
you're good.
Even when we were building out use cases for the IoT RV, there are certain things that we didn't have, and we wanted to move from descriptive to diagnostic and kind of progress in this evolution of data analytics. And we would have to go build that out, and we would have to figure out, okay, what data source do we need, and then actually build out what scripts do we need to make. And there was a complex and time-consuming portion to actually trying to make that evolution. So completely understand what you were saying.
I think one of to kind of go along with that, we talk about move from intelligence to wisdom, which I think my mom is still waiting for me to make that. But from a business case, one of the more interesting things I've seen organizations, and it's funny because when we're sitting right here in the shadow of the Fortune 100 company like this, it's very interesting, right? A lot of it is that you've seen a lot of these organizations, whether they're IT or line of business, and especially around Splunk, you see it a lot, is I think the challenge has been is I'm not going to give you that. That's my data. It's my business unit data. I don't want to share that. Yep. And what we really see is that it's actually the more stuff you're willing to throw in that same bucket, at first it's like, holy, what do I have, all this mess of silliness? But you start finding those patterns in there. And what's interesting is people think that, well, of course that makes sense. We're actually finding that when you base it on the data, a lot of it's really counterintuitive.
Absolutely.
You're like, well, what the hell? I would have never thought that, but the data bears it out, right? So I think you look at, security is one of the easy ones. I use that for quotes, right? Because it's pretty simple: log this, source IP, bad thing, signature, do a thing. When you start looking at this building, Davis or Frank has his badge and I had mine on earlier. We start seeing places where there's more of that blend, right? To where are people in the building? And there is a use case for that from both an analytics standpoint of where do people spend their time in the morning, where are the normal bottlenecks? Do we need to think about preloading the HVAC system? To tying it into an IT thing, right? That obviously the security thing there is, okay, if my badge isn't present, I probably shouldn't allow you to log in.
Right.
Where do we spend the most time in the building? But then you also get into more of the, not from a security standpoint, but near and dear to my heart, and that's the other half of my brain that we'll go over with a beer later, is the privacy aspect of it. You have all this data, right? And analytics only works at scale, right? And it's a pithy thing to say, but it's also the truth of it, right?
Absolutely.
So then you start looking at if I'm Arrow and we want to do these cool things, we have all these IoT neat things, and then I'm looking around the parking lot here, we're outside, and there's all these brand new cars, and I'm a car guy as well, so the Corvette's the coolest thing we do.
No, absolutely.
But all these cars, new cars, have Wi-Fi in them. They've got trackers in them. Y'all are carrying a phone on you. So do you extend that digital shadow, as it were, to your employees? Where are they at in in the city? Or can we do safety things like that, right? If there is, in the terrible world we live in, if there's an active shooter event, right, where are my employees at? If there's an accident on I-25, do we automatically notify their supervisors that all these things are there? So there's this idea of you can do all these amazing things with it. But I think that before we get to there, we've got to learn to be better custodians of that data for folks. And then each of these different discrete business units, they have to start learning how to work with each other more effectively, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of breaking those silos, what are the commonalities in those data? What are the common use cases, and how do those analytics play into that whole bigger strategy for an organization? And that's not an easy job, right?
No.
Because you've got the raw data, so you got to have someone like a Frank that can understand that craziness. But then you're also asking these folks to understand what is Arrow's business? How do we go to market? Where are people coming from? And so that can be a pretty big job. So I think in the next probably 3 to 5 years, that's the real challenge, right?
Yeah.
I think some of the technical challenges have been addressed in a fairly effective manner, right? Yeah, we still need data scientists, but hell, I can give me a tool set and get some analytics out, and I don't need to be a data scientist, right? I can probably BS my way through some of it, some of the cool tools that are on it. So I think you get those tools into the hands of the business owners, that's where you're really going to start to see some of these really interesting use cases show up.
Absolutely.
So from our aspect, those partners, to kind of tie it back, they're not going to have $200,000 data scientists, right? They're not going to have these folks. That's where folks like Splunk and Arrow can really bring to bear, right? We either have those folks or have those relationships. So if you come and say, hey, I'm going to start the hell with this podcasting stuff, we're going to start a brewery, but we need some data scientists. We would come to Arrow and say, hey, need a data scientist. We'll give a free keg of beer. Y'all give us a data scientist.
There you go.
I think those are the places where we can really bring that to bear for the channel and for the Splunk relationships.
So you made a nice transition there, because I want to talk about the security practice within Arrow. So as you said, a lot of the technology challenges have been addressed, or they're being addressed very effectively, and they're getting easier. Call it democratization, call it what you will. But there's still obviously a very real need for great partners and great consulting capabilities. From your perspective, leading the security team, what's sort of the vision for the Arrow security practice today and in the near future?
So for Arrow, for any large organization that has a security practice, the technology is going to change, right? Today something's really cool, tomorrow something else will be neat. The reality of it is that and if you don't know the stats, I won't go way into them, but security is wildly understaffed. The organizations keep getting complex. Now, tie it back to the scenario I just painted with all of our cars and vehicles and all that. I got data in motion. I got different users. I got public users. I have private users. I have all this. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, the nerd part of my brain just had an overload meltdown of like, are you joking me right now? Really long story short, but I'll go into it, is automation orchestration. For years, I've been in the security industry as an actual practitioner before I learned to speak English semi-coherently on that side of the house, right? And we were always in the fear of don't block anything because it breaks something, right? IDS, we always had in detect mode, never in prevent mode, right? We would always watch these things. Realistically, and I'm starting to see a shift, and I'm probably one of the different ones on it, I say break it. Stop something before bad happens. I've talked to a lot of CEOs and CISOs in my years here and been very grateful for it. But some of them have that we can't stop business. We can't stop business. I say bull. Because a 5-minute outage, okay, that sucks. That costs you $1 million. Let's pick $1 million, right? Yeah, how bad is it going to suck if Arrow gets smacked by CryptoLocker
Yeah.
and I have to repair thousands and thousands of workstations? We know the bad actors. We know what bad looks like. We know what stupid is, right? Just automatically stop it and block it.
Yeah.
Because parsing Splunk logs day in, day out that's why yours is gray. That's why mine is gray. 'Cause that stuff sucks, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to do that all day long.
Absolutely.
So automate it, get rid of it, orchestrate it. You know what bad is. Block it, drop it on the floor,
Yeah.
ignore it. I don't need to be alerted of that. Cull actual relevant data, look at good data. So I think the more stuff you tie into, especially from security, firewall logs, switch logs, router logs, workstation logs, yes, they have their place, but you start looking at the behavior of it. Where did it come from? What time of day did it come from? How long it's been doing that? That becomes an interesting piece, right? Start tying in physical data, like where's the badge at, right? Where's that vehicle at? Things like that. I think you're going to see identity is really where things go, right?
Absolutely.
Because that bottle, who cares if it has a pressure temperature sensor on it? What's going on with it? Where did it come from? What is that device doing? Identity is doing. And I mean identity with devices as well.
Absolutely.
Not just people, but an IoT device, right? We mentioned temperature and pressure sensors, right? Well, that bottle, if it has one, for example, it's going to have a sensor in at some point. It will tell you where it's at. It'll tell the bottler how long it's been on the shelf. It'll tell the store, and they're being developed, right? Now, should that thing be talking to the gateway, or should it be spewing information to Kazakhstan?
Absolutely.
Maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe that's where your distributor is. But that becomes an issue of knowing what that data looks like. And I think that, candidly, we have a pretty poor idea of what good looks like on modern networks.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be solved first.
Okay.
And then huge in the automation orchestration tool set. And again, I'll get off my soapbox because that's another podcast.
No, I'm curious because I want to go kind of a layer deeper into that. So when you think about automation and orchestration, are there emerging technologies today that you think make that more possible now than it ever has been?
Yeah, I mean, Splunk made an acquisition in that area. The Phantom acquisition is huge for that. There are a lot of others. There's some others out there. We can name them off, but you're already seeing them. And there's just the traditional tools we've always used: Python, Bash scripting. Linux has been far ahead in that for a long time on those things. And there's a lot of stuff out there. I think what needs to happen though is that, bluntly, get on board with it. Right. Instead of deciding you want to tell your sizzle, we blocked 3 million attacks last month. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
You blocked 2.9 million drive-by scans from some idiot on a Comcast router in his house. You maybe actually really defended 1 or 2 actual attacks, right?
Yeah.
So, again, parse that silliness out. Separate that wheat from the chaff, as it were, or the really bad from the script kiddies out there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of places emerging in that. Now there's some interesting work specifically around security. There's some open source initiatives on there. There's the open exchange layer. There's the MITRE attack structure that's out there. Some open source tools on there. Surprisingly, McAfee and some others are working on the OpenDX layer for some of this exchange stuff out there. That I think is hugely important, right? Everybody wants their secret sauce, and you're locked. Oh, it's my stuff. Neat, cool, I get it. However, there is a benefit for all of us to share that security information, right?
Absolutely.
Because without having that, all the cool stuff that we can do is pointless. And you've seen it, right? I mean, on the nation state level, right? I mean, we see it again and again. It's on the news every day, right? We see it with foreign countries, stealing our intellectual property data. It's been a proven fact, right?
Yep.
So if we can actually automate responses to those things that are just do that. And so I think quit saying people and actually go get it done, right? Use those tool sets, whatever flavor they are. But I think you're seeing that more of those are having some commonalities to them. They have common APIs or common exchange vectors, so they can actually take some of that data and do something useful with it.
No, absolutely.
I'd like to make another comment on what Deb was just talking about as well. As I talk to people, organizations all over the place, they're all asking for automation. They want to automate. The other thing is just like a sprawl of so many other things in our industry, there is an enormous sprawl of security tools and apps and things, right? And have dozens of them in any organization. Customers, they want to have their hands in the stuff, but they don't want to have their hands completely in the stuff. So I'm also seeing a real trend, a real move towards kind of a co-managed arrangement, right? They want to have their hands in it. They don't want dozens of tools. They want a few. They want to use those things to automate, but they want somebody else kind of taking over a lot of the heavy lifting and work that they feel they just don't want to do all day long. It's just kind of the trend I'm seeing. So
No, it
opportunity to chase that.
That makes sense, and I also think that in this growth of all these different trends or tools, but also techniques out there. So all the changes and evolutions in things like machine learning and deep learning, how is that impacting the cybersecurity landscape today?
So machine learning for sure, right? If you look back, 15, 20 years ago, has it really been that long? You look at things like Snort, right? If you're familiar with Snort, it was pure signature database, right? We had to look for it, see what that is, and any variation therein creates a database, right? And you saw it with antivirus, right? How many times you download a DAT file or whatever it might be from whatever it is. Now you move into it where endpoints are looking at what's the behavior of it, right? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So in the same way, I think that would be a huge boon in cybersecurity if you see what does normal look like, right? If you know what good looks like in a network, then you can almost inherently understand that that's out of the normal, right?
Yep.
Now, is it necessarily bad and drop it on the floor? No, maybe we're just bringing on a new business partner that we have to establish some connections. But the tools are out there, but again, I think the frustration is in any tool set is that we have a lot of folks in the industry, and not good or bad, just the way that the training is, that know enough to be okay in their own job. They do not have the ability to fully understand how to automate, how to orchestrate, or how to set those baselines up. So I think, especially we'll stay with security, if we could get better baselines, and whether that's from large data sets that are shared out, or I think what needs to happen is more assessments, and that means assess your networks people, run the assessment, get some baseline to understand what that is, right? I'm not saying go block things, but then pull in these threat feeds, pull in other pieces like that, and darn it, people, do not be afraid to ask for help.
Yep.
This is a community. I think everybody wants to protect their own jewels, and I get all that, but there is a community out there, and reach out for help, right?
Yep.
Frank made a good point, especially in, I think, the big data space and security. We really see it. There are some folks out there that are super, super sharp at it, and they have managed service providers. They're there to help you do those things. So learn from them. Use their experience, and if you don't have the resources or the wherewithal, go use that, right? Go grab that. I definitely see that's where go to stuff like like Black Hat, go to stuff like RSA Commerce, go to stuff like .conf, and network with your peers.
Well, so you bring up Black Hat, so that actually makes me think of the other side of it, which is like, how are you seeing the threat vectors change as adversarial groups, whether state actors or script kiddies or whoever, right?
You want to use
right, whoever they are. How are you seeing those emerging technologies like AI and machine learning make that threat vector so much more dangerous?
They're using the same darn thing, right? I mean, it's the whole paradigm, the arms race.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it really is, and actually, it makes the adversary's job that much easier, right?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
It's an interesting thing, right? I was talking with one of our gentlemen that did IoT, and his name escapes me, but PhD, way smarter guy than me. But he's, what would you rather have from an attack perspective? One $10,000 machine on AWS or 10,000 $1 machines in AWS? Because now it's a matter of scale, right? Because now you've just built your own denial of service, network.
Absolutely,
like, you think about that, it's like, you don't necessarily need all that horsepower. You just need a whole bunch of it spread across a big attack surface. But the same thing, you've got all these built-in functions. You've got all the tools that are available for you.
Yeah.
And it lets them really shift that. I think the days of, I own Target and I stole something from them, because that was an audition, and that's you still see some of that at Black Hat, right? It's an audition for it. But realistically now it's about corporate espionage or nation state, IP theft.
Yeah.
Right. And companies and nation states are paying for it, or it's a matter of modern warfare, and I'm not overstating it, right? It really is. It puts somebody at a disadvantage to do it.
Absolutely.
So where do I see it? Definitely it's. I mean, I'm not saying don't protect your home networks, but realistically, these folks are not going after you and I.
No.
Whoop-de-doo, right? Neat.
The value of them getting my 1,000 kid pictures
right.
is low.
Neat. I stole Frank's credit card and I charged $10,000 on Corporate American Express.
Yeah.
Woo! I actually stole design work from, a defense contractor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it gives them an advantage over our economy, and it's a potential target act. Now, where does that go? I mean, that's those decisions are made way above my pay scale, So, but I do see it as definitely being something that all of us should be aware of.
So I think you both gentlemen work in this area. You're day in, day out talking to a lot of customers. When you think about the folks who are successful in creating an appropriate cybersecurity practice, if you were to sum up those good bits that people do well. What would that advice be from your perspective if you were to give 1 or 2 points of like, you need to be thinking this way or be doing this thing for folks that are really like executives or practitioners in IT trying to build out their cybersecurity practices?
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
I'd like to kind of start this, and you'll actually have more flavor to it. But something it seemed like we used to talk about, the vendors, everybody we dealt with last few years, and don't hear it as much today. And I think it's still very relevant. Is that all this really amounts to, and this is from the attackers as well as us trying to defend. It's all about the people, process, and technology. Right?
Absolutely.
So it's not about buying the coolest technology out there, or it's not about hiring the biggest, baddest person that's really the cyber warfare guy or whatever. It's about, if you look at the attackers, they run their their projects just like any other business, right? They bring people together in a meeting and they say, okay, look, here's the people, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. Here's the process we're going to use. We're going to thoroughly describe how we're going to do this. Here's the end result. Here's our strategy. We're going to use these underlying technologies to accomplish this. That's what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're not doing the same thing, and you're thinking you're just going to buy the next hottest cool technology tool or something,
just to solve your problem,
you're missing the boat. So I kind of wish we would come back and realize that. It was talked about for a while and kind of. It seemed like there's a little bit of shift onto other things now, but really, to me, that's what it really amounts to.
I like it.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, right? I'll say a little more succinctly, if I may, is that Nextgen, all the cool, application-aware stuff, that's neat. It's cool technology. I get it. And, I've made my living on it, so, I'm not saying anything. But the reality of it is, a step back from it is, candidly, come on, people. Patch your crap. Realistically, I mean, come on. CryptoLocker was a 20-year-old SMB vulnerability called Eternal Blue.
Yeah.
20-year-old vulnerability. Most everything you see out there, all this bad stuff is not brute force attacks. It's not somebody hacking the firewall. It isn't.
Yeah.
It's taking advantage of existing vulnerabilities. Yep. So patch your stuff. And if you can't because the dev is dead or whatever it is, the mission critical application, then learn to isolate it. It's 2019, so the counterpoint is all that neat technology allows you to patch it. But realistically, remediation is always more expensive than prevention. So I mean, if you're a CISO or a CIO in that role and you don't have the gumption to actually go in front of your boss and we need to patch our stuff, I think you should be fired. Yeah. And that will be a very unpopular opinion. I welcome the hate mail goes to me, not these guys. But that's the truth of it, right?
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, if all you're protecting is a garbage interior, it's still a garbage interior.
Yep.
And what's really funny about that, David, is there was a book written, you're probably very familiar with it, The Cuckoo's Egg.
Yep.
Cliff Stoll.
Yep.
A student at Berkeley University. And the setting in that was, 1980, I think? So a long time ago.
Yeah.
And what was it about? What you just said?
Yeah.
Patching.
Yep.
Somebody didn't patch something, somebody snuck in.
Yep.
Somebody didn't patch something else, and they took advantage of that. So it was a matter of chasing.
And gratuitous shout out, if you're logging your stuff properly and it goes to the right data source and you have the right people on it, I bet you could probably find out where your holes are.
Absolutely.
So we are exactly, according to our Splunk dashboards, 4 days, 8 hours, and 18 minutes away from the beginning of conf. What are you most excited to either hear or see coming out of the conference?
Oh, any one thing? How could I answer that? I guess another just generalized answer to your question, and that is, for quite some time now, we've been hearing all year long about, we're going to announce this at comp. Something's coming at comp. We're not going to talk about anything right now. Just come to comp. So, we're really all in suspense thinking about it. There's going to be a lot of stuff talked about and announced at comp because,
cool stuff.
There's been the necessary things happening during the year, but there should be some pretty significant things going on all the way from the products, the technologies, the acquisitions, where we're going in the future, just that whole ball.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a technologist at heart, so shiny stuff's always cool as well.
Yeah.
But for me, again, it's great. I mean, I get to see some of my counterparts from across the pond that I don't get to see very often. A good friend of mine's coming in from London, so I get to hang out with him. I'm sure one morning, as a result, will be absolutely horrifying. But again, it's the workshops too. It's getting in there actually and saying, what are you actually doing? Right? I mean, the marketing whizzy stuff, that's neat. Don't get me wrong, and that's what we're there. But it's, what are you actually doing with it? And it's that whole holy crap, you're doing that with that? I didn't know you could do that. Those are things, to me, that's the coolest part, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that you don't get from a white paper. You don't get from, a main stage keynote presentation.
Absolutely.
It's whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah.
You gratuitously steal that from people, and
I
vice
love it.
versa. So.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, it's been awesome to chat with you about what Arrow's doing from an IoT and cybersecurity perspective and how you're partner with Splunk. But I want to shift gears. We've had some fun learning from you professionally. We want to learn a little bit more about you personally. And I want to say thank you again for sponsoring the Big Data Beards
We're
Road Trip
happy
to
to have
Conf.
you.
But we're going to let Brett Roberts ask you our questions that we like to call rapid fire. So the advice here, gentlemen, is answer the question with whatever the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh boy.
Brett, it's all
right.
yours, buddy.
You ready? Okay, so we're gonna start with you, and we'll just go ping pong back and forth. Okay. So, what's the last book that you've read that you would recommend to our listeners?
I reread the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I went and saw the movie It, so I reread that and then the Dark Tower series.
Strong.
It was good.
No, absolutely.
Awesome. What about you, Frank?
Well, it's actually a book that I picked off my shelf and read again. And actually, it's not about all the contents in the book. It's just about what the theme of the book: raving fans. Right?
All
It's
right.
just, if everybody you're dealing with, if there's a raving fan, I mean, how much better can that get?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then all of our raving fans for the Big Data Beer podcast are chiming in right now. It's perfect.
Thanks, Mom.
Shout out, Mom. All right. So, Frank, if you had to pick a song that you would have played when you walk on stage for some conference, what would that song be?
I'll make you feel better. This is the question that stumps everyone.
Yeah.
I finally have mine.
You finally have
No,
yours?
I don't.
So you could just turn it around on Brett and ask him.
You got me. I'm thinking of some, probably something, an old hard rock song.
All right.
Can't
Something like Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, something
Yeah,
like
maybe
that,
something like
that frame.
So I got 30 seconds to think about it. So Train of Consequences by Megadeth. I love the riff in that
Strong.
song.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, love it.
Coming
All right.
hard.
So, David, what piece of technology is currently making your life worse?
Next generation firewalls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your line of work, I could see that being a real royal pain.
Yeah. Because no one migrates them properly.
What about you, Frank?
What piece of technology is
Making your life worse.
making it worse? Probably my laptop.
Yeah,
Your
nobody likes those
ROIT.
HP laptops.
Yep.
There's a bunch of going to be raving fans on this
That's
to
right.
fix Frank's laptop. So just saying.
That's right.
All right, so Frank, staying with you, what is your biggest personal money pit right now?
An old house that I'm restoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can
How
use
old
some
is it?
dollars.
It's about 40 years.
Ooh, nice. It's right in the sweet spot where everything goes wrong.
Well, a house is just it's a revolving cycle, right? About the time
Absolutely.
you get something fixed and you get all the way around, it's time to fix it again. So
Yep.
it never goes away.
Yep, I hear you. What about you?
I still own the first car I ever owned. It's a 1956 Chevrolet 150.
Wow.
So,
No kidding.
New motor, new transmission, new brakes, new suspension. And weirdly, it cost me money in other things like handbags, purses, stuff like that. Because,
The companion purchase.
yeah, it's weird how that works. Yeah, it's really weird how that works. Like, I know that transmission only costs that, but where the so?
But the Michael's Kors bag would look
Yeah,
beautiful
no,
next
no.
to it.
Go-
So
yeah,
we'll
no,
have that.
It's yeah. I'm like, hey, how much was that? She goes, how much is your new transmission?
We don't have to talk about this anymore.
Exactly.
Marriage is awesome.
All right, so what show are you binging on right now?
I have been watching The Blacklist.
Okay.
Strong.
I'm about 3 seasons behind, so shut up.
You
So I'm on
got
season
it.
1.
Okay.
So I'm
Keep
behind
going.
you.
Keep going.
It's worth it. Keep going.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Frank, what about you?
I'm not binging any particular shows.
All right.
I'm kind of more. If anybody knows me and knows, I'm kind of eclectic. I like a little bit of everything, and I try to force myself to not just stay too focused. I never go on vacation the same place. Never watch the same show. I'm all over the place.
All
There you
over the
go.
place.
Try
Love
to
it.
Keep it really mixed up.
Or you just
Force
can't make,
myself.
or the counterpoint is that you just are afraid to make a commitment.
Or that.
Or you have ADD like me and you can't ever keep your mind on the same thing. Squirrel.
All right. So last one, Frank. Where's the next interesting place that you're going to be going to?
The most
Interesting place that you'll be going to.
that I'll be going to. Well, probably comp next week.
Yeah, buddy.
That's
Well, that's an
interesting.
easy answer.
Yeah.
I like it. Now you're from Atlanta, Georgia,
can't
right?
be
So
that.
you anywhere that isn't 90 plus degrees has got to be pretty interesting at this point.
Yeah, I'm enjoying that. Yeah.
How about you, Dave?
I actually get to go back over to London next month.
Yeah?
Yeah, it'll be
Nice.
good to go back over and see some of my friends over there. So
Good times. Well, gentlemen, it has been awesome to have you on the Big Data Beard
Thank you,
podcast.
guys.
Again, thank
It's
you
been
for your
great.
support of the road trip to Conf. Thank you for your partnership with Arrow and Splunk and Dell Technologies. We've had so much fun on the road trip talking with all the companies that have been part of it. And we'll see you on the next Big Data Beard podcast, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks for listening to the Big Data Beard podcast.
This amazing adventure would not be possible without our incredible sponsors. We thank you, Dell Technologies, VMware, Red River Technologies, Arrow Electronics, and Converging Data for making the road trip to Splunk.conf 2019 possible.
And be sure to smash that thumbs up button so we can keep the episodes coming. Until next time, keep being awesome.